Mr. Chairman, we're ready to get going.
We'll call the meeting to order. It is 5 after. It's 9 o'clock. We are the 2023 Board of Equalization Review for Union County. We have been appointed by the county commissioners to hear any and all taxpayers with respect to concerns, complaints regarding evaluation of their property for tax purposes. Property owners appearing before the Board of Equalization Review will have the right to a fair and equitable hearing. The Board of Equalization Review has been charged with ensuring that the proper legal principles have been applied in all valuation disputes for tax purposes. Format's going to be, court will call the case, locate the property or real property, and explain the situation. The appellant will present his or her case. The assessor's office will offer a defense. Both parties will be given opportunities to rebut or conclude. All questions from either party should be directed to the chairman. The board will rule on the case or table it and inform the taxpayer when it will be reopened. The taxpayer will be notified in writing of the board's decision. By statute, the burden of proof is on the taxpayer to demonstrate that the assessment is erroneous. Make sure your cell phones are off. Make sure mine is off. It will hurt your chances if your cell phone does ring while you're trying to appeal to us. Any questions? If not, let's start. What do we have up first?
We have hearing 1-410291, Good Ranch Corporation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The taxpayer was unable to attend the meeting this morning, but they did send us a position letter along with a AIA report documenting the costs on one of the buildings that they're appealing this morning. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes and reviewing their position letter. After that, I can give you a little bit of a timeline of the audit. Again, this is a business personal property audit. And then we have our outside auditing company here to present on behalf of the county.
Okay.
Okay?
Y'all want to read for a minute or two here, gentlemen?
I've been looking through it, but yeah, I'm good whenever y'all are.
Oh. Angie, you didn't put the mic on.
y'all gonna present?
Well, I'm going to give you a background of it. So,
Okay.
for the record, my name is Robin Mary. I'm a deputy tax administrator with the tax administrator's office. This audit began as an outside audit in December of 2021. Due to COVID and some scheduling difficulties, it's dragged on for about a year and a half. We did have a site visit with them in December a year ago. At that point, we provided them with findings before we actually sent them the discovery findings letter. So we did our site visit, we compiled all of our information, we gave them our findings, we said, hey, take a look at it. You know, they didn't really say much at that point in time, so then we sent out the letter. At that time, they did appeal. After that discovery, we had some back and forth, then we went to an assessors conference. After the assessors conference, they come to the BER. So that's kind of the long and the short of everything that's happened over the last, couple of years. Do you need any more detail than that, or does that kind of give you a sketch?
It gives us the background.
Yeah. So if you don't have any other questions for me, kind of like on the general aspect of why we do audits, why we use an outside auditing firm, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our outside auditor, which is Tax Management Associates, and they'll present, their audit findings, their methodology, and answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, please come up here and enlighten us.
Good morning. My name is Chip Borgalt. I'm with Tax Management Associates, and this is,
Donna Skidmore. I'm a senior auditor with tax management.
yep. So I can speak more. I have probably 20-plus years of experience with our firm, so I could speak more to our methodology, but Donna was on the technical side, actually the one at the site visit and interacting with the taxpayer directly. Do you want her to go ahead and give just a high-level results of the audit?
Yeah,
And then I'll
that
get
sounds
into
good.
Sure. And so when we did the site inspection, we did not have as much information as we'd like, and particularly concerning the building expansion. They had a cost of the building expansion. We didn't have a breakdown of things that would be included in that were personal property. At that point, we can use 50% as personal, 50 as real, or we actually went through and took the value of the real property, subtracted it from their cost, and used that as their personal property value. It wasn't until last week that they provided the AIA document, but it's not at the detail we would need to make any adjustments.
Yeah, I think in the short for this particular case, statutorily, we know that there's a definition of what's taxable. And the only thing that should be excluded is what's excluded per statute or what's exempted. All the assets that we're questioning here are not statutorily exempted or excluded. So we know that they are taxable. It's just a question of whether they fall into the real estate category or personal property category. In an audit like this, when you get into a building expansion or any building of any kind, you want the documentation behind it to justify where to bucket those items. During the time of audit and on-site inspection, I think specifically on site inspection, she noticed there was a significant amount of electrical that was very dedicated to machinery. So from a mass appraisal standpoint, we wouldn't expect that to be included on the real estate. A real estate person from the county accompanied us on that visit. So we were in conjunction with the county that there are items on this list that we're not seeing, and we know they have to be buried in the real estate items. And so we identified some specific items where we think those numbers exist and asked for additional documentation. We did not receive that documentation. So at some point, you really end up with having to do an estimation methodology and saying how we're going to assume, knowing that we don't see this personal property type item that we visually can see listed in your list of assets, we're going to have to assume they're buried in the real estate cost and extract some portion. So they can test the methodology, but I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to we needed documentation. We've not been provided that. So rather than go around on methodology, we really would just like the documentation to get to the end result. They did provide a single document, AIA document, but this is dealing with more than one asset. So it's still insufficient information at this point to conclude an alternate number. And that's kind of where we reside at this point.
I guess ultimately, the difference will be when it comes to depreciation between personal assets versus real, as it depreciates.
Mr. Chairman.
There's going to be a difference if you don't have it right.
His microphone on.
Oh, his microphone's probably not. Yeah, I'm here, Echo.
Can y'all hear me now? Okay.
That's the first time I've heard that.
So that's going to have to be figured out. To be in the buckets have to be right eventually here
Sure.
because they're going to depreciate differently and personal items get disposed of readily and there's a way different, depreciation schedule.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I can speak to that. When we go and look at the taxable value on a business personal property line item, we do depreciate it before it's taxed.
If you don't have the right items in the right bucket, you don't have the right number to work from to do the depreciation.
Well, we know that the book value, let's say in this case, we know that the book value was completed in 2019 of $5 million. Okay. We don't know the allocation of the $5 million, but we know $5 million was spent in 2019. The very first year we would pick it up is 2020. Okay. So in lieu of any documentation that clearly split out the real estate and the business personal property, what we did is we took that $5 million, we took out the real estate taxes, and we said the rest of it was business personal property, and then we depreciated it a year before we actually taxed it. Now, if they would have given us the documentation that we needed, then we would have put it on the correct depreciation schedules, in that it would be machinery and equipment,
Right.
or, leasehold
Whatever it may be.
improvements, whatever that bucket would be. But because we weren't provided that information, we had to put it in building improvements, and we had to depreciate it for 1 year using that depreciation schedule.
You've got there's a schedule in here, $5 million. Is that the detail that we're talking about?
For one of the items we're talking about, we would have liked to have AIA documents for all of the items in question. What we got back was this, I believe, in the past, just recently, a document for one of them.
That's this one, too.
Correct.
Yeah, the
So it's
5.7.
partial. We can make some conclusions based off of that for one item, but not the entirety.
So what percentage are you, is this thing on? No, it's not.
You got to push the button.
Is it on now? What percentage are you going to use?
Currently, it's not been done on a percentage basis, but it roughly comes out to around 45%. If you look at both of the asset examples, it's right around 45%. What she was explaining is rather than a percentage, they looked at it and said, well, if you have $5 million in cost for an asset and you have I don't have the specific.
2.9 was real estate.
2.9 million in real
rest is
estate,
personal.
they backed out the real estate cost, which is the methodology they can test. But either way, I mean, it's pretty consistent across the state to use a percentage basis. I mean, over in Mecklenburg County, it's common 50% when they don't provide information. So this is in line with what's used elsewhere in the state, regardless of the methodology.
So they
applied.
don't agree with the 45, right?
Correct.
What happens if they supply you this week with this detailed schedule and it's different than 45? Do they have to reappeal that, or what? How do they work?
I can't speak to the appeal process on that. I'll let the county speak to that. But I mean, if it merits a change, then
Okay.
generally we would modify it with appropriate documentation. And that's, the end of an audit the estimation is not the ideal outcome. We want actual figures.
Okay, so the way I see it anyways is you got to go by this percentage because they didn't supply the information you wanted, so
That's why we're here, correct.
it's their problem as far as I'm concerned.
There was no detail provided for the second asset in question, but the first one they provided a summary. It looked like a summary of an AIA document, but we couldn't really be definite on what we needed to pull out of that.
Yeah.
And if we do include these items on the personal side, it's to the taxpayer's advantage. It depreciates a lot quicker than if it's on the real estate.
Well,
No, I understand.
that answers my question. You got to do what you got to do.
Now, Mr. Chairman, if I can answer Ray's question, the next step of this, based on the BER decision, would be to go to the PTC. And at that point, then we're talking lawyers and everything else. So then we would have, you know, the right to get more information.
Okay.
You know, more, we'd have a better avenue of requesting documents.
Thank you.
I guess one option is to sit back and say, we want all this information to be reviewed for the next meeting to put this to bed, otherwise it goes to a higher level and it's gonna cost everybody a lot more. Is it worth the effort to give them to the
Well,
next meeting
I'd
to
have-
provide
let
information?
me-
I don't
let me
know,
chime
I'm
in.
asking, because I don't know the background. Y'all dealt with the background for a number of years over this.
There's a couple of options. One, you can direct us to work, to attempt to work more with the taxpayer
Yeah.
to get more information that so far they've been not
Reluctant.
forthright in providing.
Right.
Either to us directly or to the audit firm.
Right.
We can attempt to do that and bring it back to the first meeting next year. Obviously, we'd like to have it settled back well before then. Or you make a ruling upholding or changing what the current results are, and then they can take the next appeal avenue, which then leads to more discussion prior to a hearing at the state level. So either way will accomplish hopefully a similar result.
Yeah.
It's up to you which way y'all want to go with
And I
that.
assume you just assume not have to go to the state level if you didn't have to. That's what I'm trying to.
I don't have any qualms about going to the state.
Yeah.
The taxpayer has that right. That's their remedy in the statute. We can work with that. But either way, it's going to get to the same result.
Yeah.
But it's quite probable that they wouldn't be likely to go to the state without providing this information to begin with. I mean, it'd be crazy to do that.
I think so. At that point, they would have to, or they don't stand a good argument, in my opinion.
Right.
The board has the authority to compel them to provide us that information, if y'all so chose to exercise that. We'd have to get our attorneys involved and just double check the steps necessary to do that. Because you, as a Board of Equalization Review, have subpoena authority for taxpayer records. Either way, we'll get to the end result. It's just a matter of how soon and what route we take to get there.
Yeah, I always prefer to do these things at our level if we can get the information to do it. That is my thought process personally. I'm not speaking for everybody up here, that we can get it all and resolve it here, get the information, and then be it here or here, wherever it goes, that's what the facts lead us to.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would add to that is that we have been dealing with them since 2021.
Yeah, I understand.
We have been asking for this information for a year and a half. And they just gave it to us in November because of this meeting. And we had them,
This meeting,
we had them scheduled in October. We had them scheduled in the meeting in November, but we had to reschedule that, and now we're at this meeting. We asked them for that information before the assessors conference, which is where this really should have stopped.
I think we've given them enough time.
Good
I
Lord.
really do. And pardon my ignorance on some of this, the other project they mentioned here is the one they couldn't provide any information on. What year was that done?
2008 was their other expansion.
Okay,
They
I think you said
They
that.
did not have any detail on that one. And we've been asking for this information since, I guess, February of 2022. And like I said, we got the summary last week for the first asset.
And that's the AIA documentation they
But it
provided.
wasn't full,
Right,
the numbers didn't tie out completely.
right. And then with the expansion, I mean, I may have missed something. Is there equipment that was purchased with the expansion that we don't have a record of as well?
We don't know.
Right, because I would think if they did an expansion of this magnitude,
Yeah.
there's equipment.
there's a lot of equipment.
Generally, you'd find that equipment booked as separate assets
Right.
on their
Right.
asset list.
Right,
But what happens is in environment like this, you're going to have very specialized electrical, you might have specialized air conditioning. You have specialized stuff that ends up in the real estate cost.
And I didn't know that, you said that a minute ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So that type of stuff is not valued from a mass appraisal approach
Right.
because it's specific to the equipment that's there.
And they're possibly trying to include that in here and capture its role.
We acknowledge seeing that type of stuff visually and not finding a corresponding asset on their asset detail. So we know that it has to be within these building costs. And that led us down the path of give us the detail for your building costs so that we can properly segregate the component that should be considered personal and exclude the portion that should be considered real. We don't want to pick up items that have already been assessed as real estate in your real estate value. We only want to pick up the stuff that is personal property. But without the proper documentation, we can't conclude what that breakdown is. And so you're left with an estimation methodology.
Do you,
Just a
have-
clarification on that.
do you have the feeling that the reason they're not, at least I have a feeling, the reason they're not here, I think Robin might have mentioned it and you did too, the 45% or whatever that is you're going to put as personal property, that's going to get depreciated a lot faster and not be taxed
Yeah.
on a long-term basis like the real estate piece, right?
Yeah, maybe. It's hard for me. I can't speak.
I don't
to the
know why they're not.
taxpayer,
I'm just
but
guessing.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some presumptions that can be made.
All right.
Okay, any further questions?
Nope.
Anybody want to make a motion on what we wish to do?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we go along with the tax assessor's office on the, whatever the numbers are here. I don't know what the taxes are on this, but,
Yeah, it would be the audit findings. We would go forward with the audit
all
findings.
right, we go along with the audit findings.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none? We
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
We have hearing number 2, 600189, Sidnick, Inc.
Mr. Chairman, the taxpayer is not in attendance, but they did provide us documentation on why they would like to have the late list penalty waived. This is an annual late list penalty. The annual listing form did come in untimely, so it was assessed a penalty. If you look at the first letter, under hearing number 2, that's the taxpayer's information, if you'd like to take a few minutes to respond, or to read that. And then I have the tax office information, and I have the personal property supervisor, Lamika Harrison, here to answer any questions.
Well, this is a simple case of just waiving or not waiving a late assessment penalty, correct?
Yes, sir. If you would allow Ms. Harrison to speak on the tax offices.
Yeah.
I think the next page, under hearing number 2, is the tax office's information.
Good morning. The taxpayer stated they were unsure why we didn't receive the listing timely. Going back over the history, in 2020, their listing was received on June 6th, so they had a late listing penalty assessed. In 2021, we received it on March 15th of 2021. They did not have an extension request on file. Therefore, a late listing penalty was assessed in 2021. We picked up a late listing penalty in 2022. We did not receive their listing until April 19th. And the same for 2023. We received their listing on May 1st. So repeatedly, the listings come in late and they're requesting to have the penalty waived this year.
So in the past, they have requested, correct?
They've never requested to have the penalty waived,
Okay.
from what I could tell.
But they continually filed late.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions of
I
staff?
don't have any.
None.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any discussion amongst you? Or does somebody want to call the question on waiving of the penalty or not?
I don't think we should either.
No,
so.
yeah.
I make a motion, we do not waive the penalty,
Yeah, deny the request.
deny the request.
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the appeal is denied. And we're on to Waxhaw Lodge again.
Yes, sir.
How many times have we seen Waxhaw Lodge?
Twice at least. The parcel is 05112-021, Waxhaw Lodge.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Again, the taxpayer is not in attendance, but they set a documentation in for us. They're requesting a reduction of the tax bill for the past years. We've already addressed a reasonable payment plan. They have to request that with the tax collector, not with the board. If you have any questions, I do have Travis Muscusa here from the Assessment Division. He is my tax relief and assessment coordinator. He can speak in greater detail to their situation and why we would recommend compromising the tax bill.
Good morning. So, like she said, they requested a compromise of the tax bill. Back in 2021, we had a revaluation, and the value of the building, which is pretty bad, had reverted, had went up based off the schedule of values to a value of $67,400, and that was an increase from 2020 that the value was at $9,300. So we felt that with the state of the building being in pretty bad shape, that we could possibly revert the building value back to, and that's what we used. We couldn't do anything with the value, but with the value being that low, we decided to figure out a way to do it. So the compromise, we used the old building value to come up with the compromise. That's just the difference, would be compromised, and we'd be left with, instead of paying the building value basically of $67,400 back to the old value it was in 2020. That would be for years 21 and 22.
And everybody's kind of in agreement of that.
Sounds good.
Any questions?
Make a motion, we accept it.
Okay. Second. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the appeal, the compromise, say aye. All those opposed, hearing none, it is accepted.
We got hearing number 4, 416347, 3-Star Enterprise LLC.
Mr. Chairman, the taxpayer is in attendance. He did send a letter to us. I believe we got it Wednesday. You can read that letter, and then the taxpayer can speak to any questions that you may have.
Okay.
My understanding is that this late listing penalty is a result of a property tax audit. My understanding is I didn't do a good enough job noting the disposal of equipment. So we ended up with a property tax bill for 5 years, I think. I'm requesting just to remove the late listing penalty for financial hardship. We're just, on top of everything else, it's just be a challenge.
I guess I want to understand the question again. Was the equipment disposed of?
We believe so.
Not listed, or just not, you just didn't list? I want to be 100% clear.
So we had a property tax audit, 18, 19, 20, 21, I think. We could not prove that this equipment was removed from the building at this particular date. So we ended up with a higher, we got back property taxes now we're going to have to pay. And because it goes back to previous years, we didn't list it in those years, so we've got a late listing penalty. That's as I understand it.
Okay, so I think I know what you're saying is the asset might have been retired in the year 2000. 100,000 or whatever, and kept on your books, which you never wrote off, and the auditors picked it up, because it's still on your schedule of equipment, right? You just didn't remove it from your books.
That's probably one of the different ways that I did it wrong.
Okay. Gotcha.
Do you personally handle the listings each year, or?
I do.
Yeah.
I have been. I won't be any longer.
Right, so you didn't have a firm, a CPA firm, or anything handling
Did
it
not.
for you? Okay. And that's what I wanted to make sure of. I think Ray touched on it. There was some equipment that was retired or sold that you feel like was still being taxed on because you didn't keep your records current.
That's
For
how
lack
I
of a better
understand
term.
it.
Yeah,
That may not be right, but that's how I understand it.
right, okay.
Now, how long have you been doing the books there?
23 years.
23, oh, okay. Long enough, right?
Long enough to be no excuse. But
Time to go.
Now, vice versa, was there new equipment that was purchased that didn't get on there as well, that was uncovered in the audit?
there was. However, that was leased equipment, and it took up until last week we had supplied paid invoices from the leasing companies where they had charged us for the property taxes. So those were initially on the finding of the audit. We supplied that letter or those invoices months ago, and when we got the final listing or the final bill last week, a week before, made a phone call down to the office, and the folks were really helpful and did a double check, and in fact, those invoices had not been removed. But the new equipment I think that you're asking me about was not, we should not have had to list it anyway. It was leased property, and the leasing company was paying the property taxes, and they invoiced us for the property taxes.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Who's talking for the county?
Again, I can have our outside auditing firm,
Okay.
discuss their methodology with this. We haven't really, talked much about the audit findings since the request was to waive the late list penalty. The county does not have a problem with waiving the late list penalty because the taxpayer did their own books. Normally it's the policy of the tax office is that if a CPA prepared the listing form, that we're not quite as lenient. But given that this taxpayer did present or, complete his own books, the tax office is fine with waiving the late list penalty. The taxpayer didn't appeal the audit findings, only
Okay, so
a
the equipment,
request.
actual equipment is not an issue, it's purely the late listing.
Yes, sir, that's my understanding.
Okay.
And everything was timely coming back and forth between the taxpayer when requested, or all that communication was good?
We had some hiccups. I mean, speaking to what the taxpayer said, there was a lag time in us getting the revised letter back to him between the time that he had provided us with the invoices and we got the revised letter from TMA. I had accidentally done the discovery because it was in my pile of work to do. But, I mean, as soon as he called it to our attention, quickly backed everything out, adjusted it. He has a corrected tax bill out there. You'll see that he had originally asked for $66,980.94. Because of that reduction with the equipment that shouldn't have been taxed, the late list penalty now is at $4,332.68. So again, we had some bumps, but we smoothed it out.
But I think my primary piece would be he was responding timely to the county.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
And one last question is, when TMA did the site visit, I assume, did they notice that equipment was not there?
I can't answer to whether TMA did a site visit or if this was a book review.
Okay, thank you.
It depends on, the size and the magnitude.
So they probably cleaned up their books by now, right, after this audit?
I would imagine, yeah.
Thank you, Robin.
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to waive the penalty.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor of waiving the penalty, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, we have waived the penalty. Keep the book straight.
Mr. Chairman,
She's on her way up here, talk to you, y'all.
Mr. Chairman,
I hope I didn't hurt your feelings.
can we add one clarification to that motion? That is a one-time waiver.
Yes.
They will not be allowed to come back for us.
4,000, whatever,
Yeah.
$4,332.68.
They will never come back for another waiver in the future.
You put that on
Just
there,
that.
It's a one-time waiver. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the hearing today.
Okay.
Would you like me to shut off the recording, or do we have any other business to discuss?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
So this is our final meeting for this year. We would like to thank Mr. Brooks for being a part of this board. Rob and I were discussing, we think it's been about 10 years since he's been on the board. This is his final meeting. He's stepping down. So we appreciate his service and contribution to the board over this time.
Thank you. It's been a
Ray.
pleasure
Thank you,
working
Ray.
with these guys.
You're a good teammate, good man.
All right,
And with
thank
that, I hope you guys have a great holiday.
Hope you get through
Okay.
it, bud.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Now you're fully retired.
Just walk
You showed up late.
Yeah.